High-risk paedophiles on Merseyside are not being checked on enough by police because of heavy workloads and poor communication.
Inspectors described Merseyside Police's sex offender unit as seriously overstretched, with a backlog of almost 100 overdue visits to registered sex offenders. Well, we're joined now by the former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector, Peter Kirkham. Good afternoon to you. Is this a problem that you recognise, this description? Is this across the board?
It's absolutely something that will be happening in many forces. The issue is far broader than just Merseyside. It's one of capacity in the police service after 8 years of cuts. More concerning is the way that Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, Fire and Rescue Services as well now, appear to be trying to manipulate the news and trying to be putting criticism onto the police rather than ever raising the issues of their capacity to deal with these things and everything else. They prepare report after report after report that finds something to criticise, and they always put their press releases out focusing on the juiciest bit of criticism, knowing that the media will run with that, and that is questionable. The HMIC are a politically motivated organisation. They used to be headed by a retired Chief Constable. Theresa May replaced the retired Chief Constable Dennis O'Connor in 2012 with a political appointee, Tom Windsor, who's a corporate lawyer and who had been the rail regulator. She changed their ethos to one of regulation and criticism, and that is what they do with a vengeance.
Tom Windsor's not here to attempt to repudiate your claims, so we ought to make that clear. But just on this point about Merseyside's Police Sex Offenders Unit, backlog of almost 100 overdue visits to registered sex offenders. I mean, presumably, I'll try and choose my language, my words very carefully, but presumably there will be an element of triaging by Merseyside, the Merseyside force here, in the sense that they will try and keep the closest tabs on those people they consider to be posing the most severe risk.
They're doing everything they possibly can. What we need to know is that there are 1,769 sex offenders being managed in the community, 277 high risk and 6 very high risk in Merseyside. Their unit hasn't had any decrease in staff, despite the fact that Merseyside have had 25% cuts in staff, but it's got this workload, and that has meant that they're now carrying 100 cases per head instead of the recommended 50. But if the Chief Constable puts resources into this unit, what does he stop doing? That is the thing the Inspectorate never mention. They never say what they want the police to stop doing so that they can do this better. And so Chief Constables are in this invidious position. One thing I'd also note is whilst Merseyside Police have lost 25% of their staff since 2010, the Inspectorate have increased their budget and their staff. They've increased their staff by about 50% since 2010, and they've increased their budget by about 63%.
Well, again, they're not here to explain why that might be.
They're published figures from their reports.
And from what you're saying, your belief is that if more resources is put into this particular area of policing, another area will suffer almost definitely as a consequence.
Absolutely. I've not just read this report, and this report is generally very positive and very supportive about what Merseyside are doing, and they're pretty good across the piece. And in other fields, they're rated as excellent. They're the best metropolitan force in the country across the piece. This is just one small thing that they've decided to pick on, and they put it out knowing that this will be the headline, to put blame back on the police and distract from the fact that this country has got a crisis in its police service caused entirely by the government and the government cuts and the government lack of support. They're putting more resources into the regulator and taking resources out of the doers. I don't hear from any HMIC staff that are having breakdowns because of their workloads. I hear from police officers every day that are having breakdowns because of their workloads. They're leaving, they're going sick, they're leaving in mid-service. There is a crisis in policing. It's about capacity, not capability, and this is a misleading headline on a generally good report about a generally good force.
Is it always about resources in the sense that, as you say, Merseyside are generally good force? Presumably, when it comes to the assets that are spread from the Home Office to all police forces, they're fairly equitably spread out. Some of those forces will be better led than others. So that's always the government's point, isn't it? That sometimes it's about leadership, not just hard cash.
For sure. There's obviously, you know, when you've got what you've got, you choose how to deal with that and you choose how to be efficient, and there are sometimes spaces for efficiencies. But if you look across the piece, the days when there was any spare fat to cut in the police service went at least a year or two into the cuts, and we have been cutting into living muscle and bone since about 2014, and those cuts are still continuing. The government have this ridiculous mantra that they want the police to do more with less. You can't do more with less. All you can do is less with less. There's less money, there's less police and police staff hours. That means fewer police officers, that means less policing. Now, there's no one sitting around doing nothing. So somebody's got to make the decision. If you don't want to spend money on the police, what don't you want them to do? They can't just keep on doing more and more and more with less and less and less, because demand is rising across the piece as well.
Just very quickly, I know you're saying that perhaps the headlines are being grabbed here by the media, accusing the media of that, but with 100 overdue visits to registered sex offenders, what do you say to the public? What do you say to the community?
There is a triage system. They are managing that risk as best they can. They will try and obviously catch up those 100 outstanding visits. The bottom line is those visits are important, but what they don't mean is that, offenders are out of control. They rarely, are absolutely crucial. The other thing that's been said is that the police don't know where some of them are. That actually isn't 100% accurate either. The police service does. What hasn't been happening is the local neighbourhood teams, who have been devastated and almost non-existent in many areas, haven't been told, oh, there's some sex offenders living on your area. What they could do about it with all their other tasks is another matter. But it was an internal communication issue.
OK. Peter Kirkham, thank you very much for sharing your insight with us. Thank you.